Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Xner's Fireside Chats. I'm Cole Xner McHenry, of course, and I don't have a guest on with me today. It's just going to be myself here talking about the new Extra Salt roster, something I've wanted to talk about for quite some time since the roster was kind of rumored, at least, and not quite confirmed. That's kind of be a big caveat throughout this entire video. Not sure um, if it's 100% just yet. Obviously, we've seen some changes from the rumor that we saw earlier, I believe on Dust 2, that it was no longer going to be Rush filling in for this roster, and I still don't know if any rumors have come out since then of who it would be to take Rush's place. So, with that in mind, I guess we'll start things off with talking about why Extra Salt needs a new roster in their previous year so far. I think they've been around for around 14 months in the North American realm of things, and so far their success has been pretty solid as a team that has come through at probably the biggest dip. I think we're somewhat on the rise here now recently with the teams that we're seeing, some of the talent that's up and coming. We have more things to be excited about here in Counter-Strike, especially with orgs coming back. So I feel like Extra Salt, they came in at the perfect time when there was no orgs and when there was potential pieces and talent that were, still capable of being in the same place that they were. They just need maybe financial supporting. And I think that's exactly what happened with this Extra Salt roster. So they bought at this very low point in the market, and now they've been able to obviously transfer OC over. I'm not sure if it was necessarily in their plans that they would be able to give up their entire roster. I think the easiest move for them would be obviously to trade OC, keep the remaining pieces, maybe pick up Junior. I think that would have been the most obvious trade. But then Complexity kind of threw their name into the hat here for a North American team and is now buying out the core and again, this is another rumor, not yet to be confirmed, but is buying out who is Fang, JT, and Floppy. So alongside picking up Junior as well. So that means that Extra Salt their need for a new roster, and that's what I'm here to talk about in this video after that short little preface. It's an exciting one so far. It's exactly what I think North American Counter-Strike has needed for a long time and hasn't had since the introduction of Valorant. It's a veteran IGL coming in and bringing up a bunch of young guns. I will say that well, maybe not necessarily the youngest team. Minus, I believe, is 18 and has really shown his full force here recently. I'll get all into the details later with each individual player, kind of an intro. But yeah, I think that this is exactly what we needed. I would have really liked to see Rush on this team as well. I think he could have provided a lot more on this roster than on EG, where, might not be quite fit for Tier 1 Counter-Strike, but, obviously we have to really see. And, of course, everyone gives him the accolade of a very strong support player. In my opinion, he just typically doesn't put up enough numbers, enough multi-frags to really maintain his position in a Tier 1 team. I think that maybe working through Extra Salt and then getting another chance at a Tier 1 team would have been the most ideal situation. But obviously, I think with the Valde concerns, EG needed to be adaptive, and Rush is a solid option. So, with all that being said, we will go into the current roster that is rumored as Rush is no longer a part of. We got Daps, Swisher, Infinite, and Minus. Lucid as the coach there, and then we're still waiting on that fifth announcement. Not exactly sure who that might be. And again, this isn't confirmed for sure yet. That's another point that I want to make before we get into the individuals here. And I think the first player that we need to start off with, of course, is going to be Daps, who has built up many players to be very strong. I think that this is a great pickup. I don't think that Daps has really done too much on the international stage himself, but he has been able to bring up a lot of talented players that later on have done things on the international stage under other IGLs, and I think that fact is very good for a team like Extra Salt and very good for the players that he's playing with as well, because while maybe this team isn't going to have the most international success, I think that's pretty obvious with the names that are on there. I don't think that, at least in the next year or so, that Swisher, Minus, and Infinite will be, contending for crazy titles. Maybe like I will say Extra Salt were able to do, like with the the Fun Spark event and the Fangs MVP stuff last year. But I don't think this roster is quite there yet. But it's a roster that can, given time, can get there, especially under the helm of Daps. He's brought up plenty of players. I think Cirque and Breeze are two of which that have played under Daps, and a lot of NA stars have as well. And so with that being the case, I think that the peak of this roster really depends on what Daps can do with the pieces that he has. And, he has some fairly strong pieces as well. I think that hopping back into Tier 1 for Daps, he showed that he's still able to put up decent numbers. I mean, I would say for an IGL, I think he did better than Stanislaw in the one event that he came back and played in. But obviously not quite fit to be a consistent Tier 1 player. So hopping into Tier 2 with motivated pieces behind him and players that he can mold to his will is a very strong sign as an IGL pickup. And again, like I had said before, this is something that's necessary for regions to grow. They need experienced players to hop into the mix, say what needs to be done, give new players opportunity to learn from experienced players. So again, would have liked to see Rush on this roster doing the same thing as Daps and kind of earning a spot back in Tier 1. I don't know if Daps will ever make it back, to be honest with you. We'll have to see what he can do with this roster, but we hope for the best. And I think that with these pieces, if he utilizes them correctly, like he has been able to do so in the past, and he has real potential. And then on top of that, the qualifier success for Daps is very good. He's historically always been able to make it through those closed and open qualifiers. And I think that right now, in the current state of North America, there's nothing more important than being able to do that. You have to try and make it to Europe in a lot of ways. Obviously, Extrasalt is an organization that might be able to financially back a Europe trip, or at least a little extended Europe boot camp. But the best way to get things paid for is just to win qualifiers. And there are plenty of online qualifiers. As we can see, Extrasalt was able to go up to Europe a couple times. They played in a couple of those Tier 2 Snow Sweet Snow events. But Daps has always had really good success in these qualifiers. And so with that being said, I think it's key to keep in mind that, that is a great way to build up roster, build up European experience, and again, another potential upside for this Daps pick alongside, many upsides to it. So, veteran IGL, pretty much to wrap this up, who can really have potential to bring up new up-and-coming North American players, which this roster is full of. So moving on, we got Minus here. He is incredibly unproven in his play, but he is very, very impressive. I've been watching a couple of demos from him, and he just seems to be such a consistent playmaking operator. I guess consistent it isn't the right word for me personally. I don't think it's quite consistent, but I think it can be very high. He has a high ceiling, yet sometimes he struggles in the consistency that experienced primary opper definitely needs to have. Once a couple of those aggressive playmaking ideas that he goes for gets shut down, I feel like he struggles to find a lot of success. On Nuke particularly, he likes to do this play towards the outer yard where he fights back red and just keeps swinging and holds the angle. He has teammates to support him in this, and of course we have to talk about the structure in his previous teams, one being Spring Roll, which obviously has what I'd have to imagine is for the most part a pug team with some good solid players in there. Obviously, I think they were able to do quite well with some upset victories helmed by Minus and his performance, but ATK I think was just another inconsistent roster for him to play on. So while my watchings of him have been limited to rosters that have done a decent job in setting him up and letting him make some of those playmaking plays, I think that that he definitely is going to thrive under a bit of structure that Daps can provide. And again, we can talk about Lucid as well and that coaching role. He might be able to help out. I know he at one point was an analyst. I'm sure he has a lot of good ideas as to how to utilize the opper in this role. But yeah, I think that the lack of experience can come back to haunt this roster and Minus in particularly. I would really like to see some more consistency out of him under this Extrasalt roster. I think that's priority number one, is getting this player to maybe even perform at like a 1.10 rating, maybe a 1.2, 1.15 in Tier 2 North America consistently before we really try and focus on other things, because right now I can see very high ceilings for him, but I can also see where he gets shut down frequently once he starts missing a couple of shots, and things can go downhill pretty quickly. Other than that, though, he's a very aggressive opper. He's capable of finding opening picks, and in an opper, I think that's one of the more important things, as we can see from some of the best oppers in Tier 1. They're always going for opening frags rather than sitting back, and I think that's a strong suit of Minus's playstyle. But now we can move on to another aggressive piece, which is Swisher, and that's going to kind of be the common theme for this roster. They have a lot of very high mechanical players that are very aggressive as well. We'll talk about later Infinite as well. But Swisher, he is a consistent, high-powered, and effective rifler. He previously played on Bad News Bears for quite some time. He played in EPL. He played in Cologne. I think his growth between those two events was very impressive. I think that was one of the strongest things I've seen come out of Bad News Bears, was the individual growth of Swisher, and obviously I think Junior, who just is always going to be a solid opper, kind of tearing up Tier 2. But Swisher was another one of those strong riflers that came out of Bad News Bears, and I'm excited to see him get an opportunity with a salaried team. That is going to be so promising. That is, if Extra Salt do end up confirming the rumors. But yeah, he's very effective at finding openers. I feel like he is a player that has kind of passed the eye test when he goes over to Europe. Obviously, some of those results are very, very struggling. But and some of the good results, I feel like Swisher had a lot of impact. He had a lot of pop-off rounds that show that he is a player capable of some very strong things, and I do expect him to do the same thing over in this roster in Extra Salt, especially again once you have that experienced vetted IGL of Daps that will know how to utilize all these aggressive pieces and probably know how to set them up as well. That was another reason I wanted to rush in this rosters. Again, like we will say, we're kind of round this one out with Infinite, or rather this video out with Infinite, but these players, they will need setup because a lot of these players are aggressive. They like to find space. They like to find openings, and Daps might be able to set them up for that. Daps might be able to allow them to go for those aggressive plays. But with Rush, that was one of his kind of accolades. That was one of the thing that everyone commented on about him. Everyone thought that he was so good at setting up his teams, and I definitely agree with that. And it would have allowed for this Extra Salt roster to thrive. Now, again, obviously, EG probably the better prospect for Rush for sure, but it would have been a really cool experiment to see him set up these young guns to see if they could kind of maybe maximize the potential that these very strong up and coming players have. But yeah, Swisher, I expect some high things from him again in this roster in a similar way to Minus, just a little more experience than Minus overall. So Infinite, there's a lot to say about him, but I mean it's, for the most part, I think the second most experienced player on this roster, at least until we figure out who the fifth player will round out to be. I think he is a player that doesn't make mistakes too often. He really knows how to take like a nice aim duel or a nice fight. Like he takes these fights that very much favor him to find opening frags quite often. And I think that's a good sign here. Again, they have so much aggressive pieces that I would like to see this fifth player be more of a supportive role. Obviously, you could have a lot of players in North America fit that, but I think one good shout and already has the chemistry with Swisher would be Spongy. Not a lot of role overlap with that as well. I think that Rush and Spongy play like similar anchor positions. I think they both play ramp, for example. I'm not 100% sure on that, but yeah, I again would have been another cool thing to add, and that's why I was really, really excited for this roster. But still very excited to see them adding just consistent top level riflers to couple this young up and coming opper. With Infinite, he had the second most impact rating on his roster alongside the second most HLTV rating, which was a really promising sign because Ponalone had the first, but his impact is actually more so than his HLTV rating, which is It just shows his consistency. Again, I feel like he doesn't make many mistakes. I think that'll really go into full effect when, you know, say Minus or Swisher does fall short in some of those opening duels. You'll have backup and Infinite to help out with this roster, and I think that kind of puts the icing on the cake for what is needed. Obviously, that fifth player, it really is up in the air. I think that Spongy would be a great pickup. I'm not sure what exactly they have planned. I imagine that they're in talks with multiple players right now, as you know, every player wants to have an org backing them, and hopefully Extra Salt they get the bag from Complexity and Liquid. So that's kind of where we cross our fingers there and see who that fifth can be. You know, whatever that may lie in, but overall, I think that there's a lot of exciting pieces for this Extra Salt roster. I think that overall they have potential over time to become in a very similar way as to what the current roster is with the players that they have picked up. They, in terms of tier 2 Counter-Strike, they really didn't pull any stops. They've got everything you could want in experience combined with young firepower that haven't or maybe haven't gotten a chance to show their full potential. So on top of that, you know, Lucid as the coach, I genuinely don't know too much about his coaching, but of course he has experience in Europe with FPX, and I don't think that can hurt at all. He was an analyst over there. He wasn't a coach, but I think that's another player that can have the opportunity to learn from Daps. So even the coach, who probably should be the player that is kind of teaching the roster, has an opportunity to learn still from the veteran IGL here. So to wrap this one up, very excited for the new Extra Salt roster if it does come to full fruition. Cannot wait to see what they're capable of doing. And again, you know, this has the potential to peak at a similar level to Extra Salt given enough time and the motivation. So with all that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to leave a subscribe if you enjoyed the video, like it as well. But thank you all so much for tuning in, and we will be back here with more to talk about very soon. Peace.